It was an ordinary autumn afternoon in Portland, Oregon. Golden and red leaves fell lazily from the trees, creating a colorful carpet across the city streets. At the local supermarket, the atmosphere was calm, almost melancholy, as if time had slowed to match the cool, gentle air that marked the start of a new season. Matthew Parker, a 35-year-old man, walked into the supermarket looking for some things for his small kitchen. He was an ordinary man, with a life that could be described as routine. He worked as a computer technician, and his days were divided between repairing computers and watching the same TV programs that no longer aroused so much interest. Since the end of a long and troubled relationship, Matthew had felt empty, almost as if he was going through his days on autopilot, with no real. As he pushed his cart through the aisles, Matthew observed the people around him, each busy with their purchases, seeming to have everything under control. He, on the other hand, felt increasingly out of place, as if he were just existing and not really living. It was in this mood that he noticed an elderly woman trying to reach a can of soup on the top shelf. She appeared fragile but determined, refusing to ask for help even when it became clear that she couldn't reach the item on her own. Matthew, moved by an instinct that he himself didn't quite understand, left his cart aside and approached the lady. With a gentle smile, he took the can of soup and handed it to her. "Here you go, ma'am," he said as he handed it to her. The lady looked at him with a tired but genuine smile. "Thank you very much, young man," she replied with a voice that carried the wisdom and fragility of the years. Matthew felt a rush of warmth in his chest, a feeling of connection he hadn't felt in a long time. He didn't expect that simple act of kindness could have such a profound impact on him. The lady, whose name was Evelyn, seemed like one of those people who have a rich history and full of experiences, something that intrigued Matthew. As they walked down the hallway together, Matthew noticed the items in Evelyn's cart. It was mainly canned food, bread, milk, and a few vegetables. The simplicity of what she was buying made him wonder about her life, her routine, and if there was anyone waiting for her at home. Curious, but without wanting to be invasive, he commented, "Looks like you're shopping for a whole week, huh?" Evelyn smiled, but this time her smile carried a sadness that Matthew couldn't help but notice. "Yes, my son. I don't need much, you know. I've lived alone for many years, and simple things are enough for me." Matthew felt a pang in his heart. Something about the way Evelyn spoke resonated with her own loneliness. He then decided to continue the conversation while helping her get the other items she needed. They spent the next few minutes walking through the halls talking about little things, the weather, the city, and how they both liked fall afternoons. Matthew discovered that Evelyn had been a widow for over 10 years, and that her children lived in other cities, rarely visiting. She spoke of them with affection, but also with a note of resignation. When they reached the checkout, Matthew offered to help Evelyn carry her shopping to her car. She gratefully accepted, and the two left the supermarket together. It was at that moment that Matthew saw what was in Evelyn's cart, and his expression changed. Among the few purchases, he noticed packages of dog food, several of them. Confused but not wanting to appear too curious, Matthew asked, "Do you have a dog?" Evelyn looked at him, and for a moment her eyes filled with tears. "There was," she replied, her voice trembling. "My faithful companion of many years, Max, passed away a few months ago. But I still buy the food. I can't stop thinking about him and taking care of his things, even though he's not here anymore." Matthew was silent, feeling the weight of that revelation. He could understand the pain of loss, but Evelyn's continued devotion to a departed companion moved him deeply. Suddenly, the act of helping that lady turned into something much bigger than he had imagined. Evelyn, without realizing it, was awakening something inside him, something he thought was lost forever. And so, in that silent parking lot of an ordinary supermarket, an unexpected connection began to form. Matthew felt an urgent need to do something, not just to help Evelyn, but to fill the void they both seemed to share, albeit in different ways. "You know, Evelyn," he began hesitantly, "I don't have any commitments right now. If you don't mind, I'd love to walk you home and help you with the shopping." Evelyn looked at Matthew, her eyes teary, and smiled. "I would love that, my son." With that, the two headed to Evelyn's car, little knowing that that simple gesture of kindness would be the beginning of a friendship that would change both of their lives forever. Matthew followed Evelyn to her car, an old sedan that seemed to have as many stories as its owner. He helped her put her groceries in the trunk, watching silently as she spoke fondly about Max, her now departed dog. Each word carried a mixture of longing and tenderness, and Matthew found himself deeply touched by Evelyn's devotion. He realized there was something about her that resonated with his own experience of loss and loneliness. During the journey to Evelyn's house, the two continued to talk. Matthew told a little about his life, about the work that no longer satisfied him so much, and about the relationship that had ended bitterly. He talked about how lost he felt, as if the world had lost its colors since then. Evelyn listened attentively, her serene gaze reflecting the wisdom that only time and difficult experiences can provide. When they arrived at Evelyn's small house located in a quiet neighborhood in Portland, Matthew was struck by the simplicity and warmth of the place. The house, with its wood-paneled walls and well-tended garden, felt like a refuge from the outside world. Evelyn invited him in and he accepted, feeling that this was the beginning of something he still couldn't define. Inside the house, the atmosphere was welcoming and full of memories. Family photos adorned the walls, and little details like a crocheted throw thrown over the couch and an old lamp next to a worn armchair gave the place a sense of home that Matthew hadn't felt in a long time. Evelyn led him to the kitchen, where he began to help her put away her groceries. As they put things in the closets, Evelyn talked about the good times she had with Max, about how he accompanied her in all her daily tasks and how his presence made the house seem less empty. Matthew noticed that when talking about Max, Evelyn smiled, but there was an undeniable sadness in her eyes. He wanted to do something to ease that pain, but he didn't know how. The conversation was interrupted when Evelyn suddenly fell silent, lost in thought. "You know, Matthew," she began after a moment, "loss is a funny thing. No matter how much time passes, it still finds ways to take us by surprise." Matthew nodded, understanding perfectly what she meant. "And truth, I don't think we ever fully recovered, we just learned to move on." Evelyn smiled, but her eyes were still distant. "Exactly, but sometimes moving on seems to be the hardest part." Matthew felt an impulse to do something, to break that cloud of sadness that hung over them. He looked around and saw something that could help. "Evelyn, what if we went to the park? It's a beautiful afternoon and I think a walk might be good for both of us." Evelyn hesitated for a moment but then agreed. Matthew knew this could be difficult for her, as the park was where she usually took Max for walks. However, she felt that somehow that walk could bring a little relief, both to her and to him. On the way to the park, they continued to talk, but now there was a lightness to the words, as if they were both starting to let go of some of the weight they were carrying. When they arrived at the park, the scenery was stunning. The trees formed a natural arch over the path, and the fallen leaves on the ground created a colorful carpet that brought autumn into the landscape. They walked in silence for a while, enjoying the tranquility of the place. Eventually, they found an empty bench on the edge of a small lake and decided to sit there. The water reflected the colors of the sky and trees, creating a feeling of peace that seemed to penetrate deep into both of their hearts. "You know, Matthew," Evelyn said, breaking the silence, "I used to come here every day with Max. He loved running around here, chasing falling leaves or just lying down next to me while I read a book." Matthew looked at her, noticing that despite the sadness, there was a sparkle in Evelyn's eyes as she remembered those moments. He felt deep empathy for her and decided to share something personal. "When my relationship ended, I felt the same way. Lost, not knowing how to move forward. For a long time, I avoided places that reminded me of her. But now I understand that we can't avoid it forever. We need to face our memories, find a way to make peace with the past." Evelyn nodded thoughtfully. "I think you're right. But sometimes that seems like an impossible task, doesn't it?" Matthew Sohiu. "It's difficult, yes, but I think we can help each other. Here today, I'm realizing that maybe it's possible to find peace in the things that bring us pain, if we give ourselves the chance to look at them in a new way." The afternoon passed quickly as they talked, sharing stories and finding solace in each other's company. Their unexpected meeting was turning into something they both needed, a friendship that filled the gaps left by loneliness. When they finally decided to return to Evelyn's house, they both felt lighter, as if the walk in the park had helped dissipate some of the pain they were carrying. When they arrived at Evelyn's house, she thanked Matthew for spending the day with her. "I don't know how to thank you, Matthew. Today was the first day in a long time that I didn't feel alone." Matthew smiled, feeling deeply grateful for that day. "I appreciate it, Evelyn. Today made me realize that life still has a lot to offer even when we think there is nothing left." They said goodbye with a promise to meet again soon. As Matthew walked home, he felt something inside him had changed. The loneliness that had accompanied him for so long no longer seemed so heavy, and he knew that his friendship with Evelyn was the reason for that. He felt inspired to do more, not just for her, but for himself. The next few days passed quickly, and the friendship between Matthew and Evelyn grew stronger. They met often, usually in the same park where Max used to play. The walks and conversations became a kind of ritual, something they both looked forward to. For Matthew, these moments were a breath of fresh air into his life, an opportunity to connect with someone who understood him in a deep and genuine way. However, one day when Matthew arrived at Evelyn's house for another one of his visits, he noticed something was different. Upon entering the room, he found Evelyn sitting in her favorite armchair, with an expression of concern that he had not yet seen on her. Beside it, on the coffee table, there was an open letter and some scattered documents. "Evelyn, is everything okay?" he asked, feeling the tension in the air. Evelyn looked up at him, and Matthew could see that she was struggling to maintain her composure. "Matthew, I received some unexpected news," she said, her voice trembling. "It looks like the bank is going to take my house. I was unable to pay some loan installments, and now they are threatening me with an eviction order." Matthew was shocked. I had never imagined that Evelyn was going through such a difficult situation. Her home, with all the warmth and memories it contained, was a refuge, and the idea that she could lose it all was devastating. "It can't be," he murmured, trying to process the information. "Why didn't you tell me before? I could have helped." Evelyn smiled sadly. "I didn't want to worry you, Matthew. You've already done so much for me, and I didn't want to burden you with my problems." Matthew felt a lump form in his throat. He knew he couldn't let Evelyn face this alone, but at the same time he wondered how he could help. Her own finances were far from perfect, but the thought of Evelyn losing her home was unbearable. "Evelyn, I don't know exactly how, but we're going to solve this together. You're not going to lose this house," he said, trying to sound more confident than he actually felt. In the days that followed, Matthew dove headfirst into trying to find a solution to Evelyn's problem. He began investigating ways to renegotiate the loan with the bank, looking for lawyers who could help, and even considering ways to raise money to cover the debts. At the same time, he continued to spend time with Evelyn, trying to keep her optimistic and distracted from the weight hanging over them. During one of his walks in the park, Matthew had an idea. He remembered an upcoming community event in Portland, a fall festival that included a craft fair and a charity auction. Matthew knew that Evelyn had craft skills. He had seen the quilts she made and the rag dolls that decorated her home. He then decided to suggest that she participate in the event. "Evelyn, I was wondering, how about making some of your beautiful quilts and dolls to sell at the fall festival? Maybe we can raise some money to help with the debts," he suggested, with an encouraging smile. Evelyn hesitated for a moment, but then her eyes sparkled with new hope. "Do you think that would work? I would love to contribute in some way. I just never thought my work could make such a difference." Matthew nodded enthusiastically. "I'm sure so. Furthermore, it is a way to involve the community. I have friends who can help spread the word, and who knows, maybe we can even hold a special auction to raise more funds." With that, they started working together, planning and organizing everything for the festival. Evelyn spent days and nights making her blankets and dolls, and Matthew took care of all the logistics, from securing a tent at the festival to creating a social media outreach campaign. He was overwhelmed by the amount of support they received. Friends, neighbors, and even strangers rallied to help. The day of the festival finally arrived, and Evelyn was nervous but also excited. Matthew helped her set up the tent, and before long, they began to attract the attention of visitors. Evelyn's quilts, with their intricate patterns and vibrant colors, caught the eye, and the rag dolls, each made with care and attention to detail, enchanted everyone who passed by. Sales started slowly but soon gained momentum. Many people were touched by Evelyn's story, which Matthew thoughtfully shared with those interested. There was a positive energy in the air, and as the day progressed, it seemed like they were really making a difference. At the end of the day, as the festival lights began to dim and the tents began to be taken down, Matthew and Evelyn sat together, exhausted but happy. They counted the money raised and realized that they had exceeded expectations. Not only had they raised enough to cover Evelyn's debts, but also a little more to ensure she would be financially secure in the coming months. Evelyn, with tears in her eyes, looked at Matthew. "I don't know how to thank you. You saved my home and my heart." Matthew, feeling overwhelmed by a wave of gratitude and joy, held Evelyn's hand. "Evelyn, you gave me something much more valuable. You showed me that life still has purpose and that we can find joy even in the most difficult situations." That day at the festival was a turning point for both of them. Matthew realized he had found something that gave him purpose, helping others and making a difference in their lives. And Evelyn, in turn, rediscovered a part of herself that had been dormant since she lost Max and began living alone. With the festival successful and Evelyn's debts paid off, life began to change for both of them. Evelyn, now more confident and excited, decided to continue with her craft, turning it into a new source of income, and also a way to keep her mind active. Matthew, in turn, began to feel a new energy in his life. The experience of helping Evelyn inspired him to look for more ways to connect with people and make a difference. He began to dedicate his free time to community projects, getting involved in activities that promoted the well-being of the community. He organized events, raised funds for important causes, and, little by little, he became a well-known and respected figure in Portland. Matthew found that the emptiness he felt before was beginning to be filled with the satisfaction of seeing the positive impact he was having on the lives of those around him. Evelyn, in turn, began receiving orders for her blankets and rag dolls. The small business, which had started as a solution to an immediate problem, was now flourishing, bringing him not only additional income, but also a new sense of purpose. She began to participate in other events and fairs, always with Matthew by her side, supporting her at every step. However, despite these positive changes, Matthew knew there were still unresolved issues in his life. The pain from the past relationship was still there, simmering, and he knew he needed to confront it in order to fully move on. It was then that, on a sunny Sunday afternoon, Evelyn, always perceptive, realized that something was still weighing on Matthew's heart. "Matthew, dear," she began while they were having tea in the backyard of her house, "I feel that despite all the joy you brought into my life, there is still something that bothers you. Want to talk about it?" Matthew hesitated for a moment but felt he could trust Evelyn completely. He took a deep breath and began to speak. "Evelyn, as much as I've found a new purpose in helping you and others, I still feel stuck in the past. My last relationship left me with deep scars, and I can't shake the feeling of failure and regret." Evelyn listened intently without interrupting, and when Matthew finished, she placed her hand gently over his. "Matthew, we all carry scars from the past. They are part of who we are, but they do not need to define our future. What you have done for me and so many other people shows that you are a man of great heart and strength. Maybe it's time to forgive yourself and accept that sometimes things just don't go the way we planned." Matthew was silent, absorbing Evelyn's words. He knew she was right, but he also knew that the journey to self-understanding and forgiveness would not be easy. However, instead of shying away from the challenge, he decided to face it. In the days that followed, Matthew began practicing something he had never considered before: self-care. He began attending therapy sessions, where he was able to explore his emotions, the feelings of loss, and the hurt he still carried. He also resumed old hobbies that he had abandoned, such as photography and running, activities that always brought peace and clarity to his mind. As time passed, Matthew began to notice changes in himself. The therapy sessions helped him understand that the breakup was not a reflection of his own inadequacy, but rather a part of the natural cycle of life. He learned to accept his flaws, to forgive himself for mistakes made, and most importantly, to understand that he deserved to be happy again. At the same time, his friendship with Evelyn continued to grow and strengthen. Matthew became almost a family member to her, and the two began to share even deeper moments, celebrating small victories and supporting each other through difficulties. Evelyn, always wise and generous, became a mother figure in Matthew's life, someone he knew he could count on whenever he needed her. One day, as they were walking through the park, Evelyn suddenly stopped and looked at Matthew with a smile on her lips. "You know, Matthew, I never told you this, but you were an unexpected gift in my life. I was so used to being alone, to living with my memories, that I had forgotten how good it was to have someone by my side. You brought light to my days." Matthew, touched by Evelyn's words, smiled. "And you, Evelyn, taught me that life can be beautiful even after the pain. I wouldn't be the person I am today without you." They continued walking in silence, enjoying the tranquility of the moment, aware that their friendship was something rare and precious. Both had faced loss and heartache, but now, together, they were finding a new way of living, a way that included more love, understanding, and acceptance. As Matthew felt stronger and more confident, he began to think about the future differently. What once seemed uncertain and scary now seemed full of possibilities. He knew there was still much to explore and discover, both within himself and in the world around him. And with Evelyn by his side, he felt that any challenge could be overcome. Matthew and Evelyn's story was not just about overcoming, but also about growth and transformation. They had found strengths in themselves that they didn't know existed, and through their friendship, they had learned that no matter how difficult things may seem, there is always a path to healing and happiness. As the months passed, Matthew's life continued to transform. The healing process he had begun, both through his friendship with Evelyn and through therapy, was finally showing its fruits. He felt lighter, more able to face the past without being weighed down by it. The pain he carried before began to dissipate, replaced by a sense of acceptance and, surprisingly, hope. Evelyn, in turn, was also experiencing a new phase in her life. The small craft business she had started out of a time of need was now flourishing. Her quilts and rag dolls became popular, not just in Portland, but in other cities as well, thanks to Matthew's help and the growing online presence he had created for her. She felt useful, valued, and most of all, connected to the world again. However, life, with all its twists and turns, was about to present a new challenge. One cold winter morning, Matthew received a phone call that left him paralyzed. It was from the local hospital. Evelyn had been admitted overnight after a sudden illness. Without hesitation, he rushed to the hospital, his heart clenching with worry. When he arrived, he found Evelyn lying on a bed, with tubes and monitors around her. She was awake, but she looked fragile, more so than he had ever seen her. The sight of that strong, vital woman in such a state shook Matthew deeply. He approached the bed, trying to control the emotion that threatened to overflow. "Evelyn!" His voice was hoarse, full of fear. She turned her head slowly toward him and smiled. A smile that, despite everything, still carried the same tenderness he knew so well. "Matthew, darling," she replied, her voice weak but firm. "It feels like my body is finally tired from this long journey." Matthew felt a lump in his throat, but he knew he needed to be strong for her. "Don't talk like that, Evelyn. You will get out of this. We still have so much to do, so many things to live for." Evelyn grabbed his hand, squeezing it tighter than he expected. "I know, my dear. But sometimes we need to accept that the body has its own limits. And it's okay. I lived a long and loving life. And the last few months, by your side, have been a gift I could never have imagined." Matthew, unable to hold back the tears, let them fall. He knew there weren't enough words to express what he felt. All he wanted was more time, more conversations, more laughter, more shared moments. "I don't know what to do without you, Evelyn," he confessed, his voice breaking. Evelyn, with the wisdom that always accompanied her, smiled again. "You will continue to live, Matthew. You will find new reasons to smile, to fall in love with life. I've seen you grow so much since we met. I know you're ready to face the world, even if I'm not around to hold your hand." Matthew shook his head, feeling lost but at the same time comforted by her words. He knew she was right. He knew that somehow this was the last lesson Evelyn would teach him, to accept loss and continue living, even when the pain seemed unbearable. The following days were difficult. Evelyn remained in the hospital and Matthew was by her side the entire time, talking to her, reading to her, trying to make every moment count. They talked about everything, about Evelyn's life, about Max, about their dreams and regrets. The connection between them, which was already strong, intensified even more. Until one night, while Matthew was holding Evelyn's hand, she fell asleep. And at dawn, she left, silently, without pain, with a smile on her lips. Matthew felt the world crashing down around him. The loss of Evelyn was crushing, but at the same time, he knew that she had gone peacefully, knowing that she had lived a full and meaningful life. During the funeral, which was small and intimate, Matthew found himself surrounded by people Evelyn had touched throughout her life. Everyone shared stories and memories, celebrating the life of a woman who, with her kindness and resilience, had left an indelible mark on everyone who knew her. Matthew realized that Evelyn had given him something invaluable, not just friendship, but also the strength to move forward, to find new meaning in his own life. He knew he needed to honor that lesson and live the way she believed he could. After the funeral, Matthew returned to Evelyn's now empty house. The pain of her absence was overwhelming, but as he walked through the rooms, he felt her presence in every detail. In the carefully folded blankets, in the photos, in the small objects that told the story of a life well lived. He sat in Evelyn's favorite armchair and let the memories wash over him. He knew life would never be the same without her, but he also knew that no matter how hard it was, he was ready to move on. Because in the end, as Evelyn always said, life was a cycle of losses and gains, of pain and joy, and that all we can do is live the best way we can, loving and being loved. The days following Evelyn's funeral were difficult for Matthew. He felt her absence every moment of his day. Her house, where he spent so much time, seemed emptier than ever. Yet at the same time, Matthew knew he wasn't completely alone. The lessons and love Evelyn had given him lived on inside him, guiding his steps as he tried to find a new normal. Determined to honor Evelyn's memory in the best way possible, Matthew began to become even more involved in community projects. Inspired by Evelyn's generosity and wisdom, he organized a series of events to raise funds for elderly people in vulnerable situations, especially those like Evelyn, facing financial hardship and loneliness. These events not only helped those in need, but also brought comfort to Matthew, giving him a purpose and a way to channel the pain he still felt. One of these events was especially significant. Matthew decided to create a charity auction in Evelyn's memory, with all items being handmade by local artisans, as well as the blankets and rag dolls that Evelyn used to make. The event, held in the park where they often walked together, was a great success. Friends, neighbors, and even strangers came to participate and show support, sharing their own stories and memories of Evelyn. At the end of the auction, Matthew took the stage to thank everyone. Looking at the crowd, he realized how much had changed since the day he met Evelyn at the supermarket. From a man lost and without purpose, he had transformed into someone who not only found his own strength, but also helped others find theirs. And that, he knew, was something Evelyn would have been proud of. Evelyn taught me that, even in the most difficult situations, we can find beauty and purpose, he said, his voice firm but emotional. She believed in the power of community, in the importance of taking care of each other. And that's what we're doing here today. We are continuing her legacy, a legacy of love, compassion, and resilience. After the event, Matthew returned to Evelyn's house one last time. He knew that he would eventually have to sell it, but before he did so, he wanted to say a proper goodbye to the place that had become a sanctuary for him. Entering the living room, he sat down in Evelyn's favorite armchair, allowing the serenity of the space to wash over him. As he looked around, his eyes fell on a small box that sat on the coffee table. He didn't remember seeing her before. Curious, he took it and opened it. Inside, he found a handwritten letter addressed to him. With shaking hands, Matthew began to read. Dear Matthew, if you're reading this, then I'm already gone. I don't want you to feel sad for too long because I actually feel at peace. Having you by my side these last few months has been the greatest gift life has given me. You brought light to my days and made me believe in the goodness of people again. I want you to know that even if I'm no longer physically here, I will always be with you. In your memories, in your actions, and in every smile you give. I believe you, Matthew. I believe in your ability to do good, to find happiness, and to continue living fully. Take this with you. Life is a cycle, and with each loss, we also gain something. I won you, and for that I am eternally grateful. Com amor, Evelyn. Tears ran down Matthew's face as he finished reading the letter. He knew those words from Evelyn would be something he would cherish forever, a constant reminder of the profound impact she had on his life. Placing the letter back in the box, Matthew felt a deep peace come over him. Evelyn would somehow continue to guide him. Over the next few months, Matthew sold Evelyn's house but made sure the new owner was someone who understood the emotional value of the place. With the money from the sale, he created a foundation in Evelyn's name, dedicated to helping lonely and struggling elderly people, ensuring that her legacy would live on. Now, whenever Matthew passed by the park where he used to walk with Evelyn, he felt a connection with her, as if her presence were there, among the trees and the leaves that fell softly to the ground. He knew life would still bring challenges, but he also knew he was ready to face them. Because, as Evelyn taught him, life is a cycle, and there is always a chance to start over, to find beauty in the midst of pain. Over time, Matthew found a new love, someone who understood his scars and walked alongside him with understanding and patience. He built a new life, but always kept a special place in his heart for Evelyn. She had been the catalyst for his transformation, and for that he would be forever grateful. And so, Matthew moved on, knowing that no matter how difficult life could be, there would always be a way to find hope and happiness again. He had learned through Evelyn that true strength lies not in avoiding pain, but in facing it and allowing it to transform us into someone better, more compassionate and stronger. A few years had passed since Evelyn left, but her memory lived on in Matthew's heart and in the lives of everyone who was touched by her. The foundation created in his name has flourished, helping countless elderly people find support and companionship in times of loneliness. Matthew threw himself into this work with passion, knowing he was honoring the promise he made to himself and Evelyn. On a sunny autumn afternoon, much like the first time they met, Matthew returned to the park where so many precious memories were held. He walked hand in hand with his wife, a kind and understanding woman who fell in love with the man Matthew became, thanks to his friendship with Evelyn. Beside them, a little girl ran happily, collecting fallen leaves and laughing with the innocence that only a child can have. They approached the bench where Matthew and Evelyn had so often sat together, and there he stopped. He looked around, feeling the gentle breeze caress his face and the leaves dance in the wind. There was a small plaque on the bench, a silent tribute to Evelyn, which read, "To Evelyn, who taught us that life is a cycle of love and resilience. Her light continues to shine in the hearts she touched." Matthew sat on the bench, his wife at his side and their daughter playing at their feet. He took a deep breath, feeling a deep peace. The journey that started with a simple act of kindness at the supermarket had turned into something much bigger than he could have imagined. As he watched his daughter play, Matthew knew that somehow Evelyn was there with him, no longer physically, but in spirit, in the peace he felt, in the love he found, and in the life he built. She had been the beginning of a new story for him, a story of overcoming, of finding himself again, and of a happiness that he thought he would never find again. And so, in that park, under the golden autumn sky, Matthew smiled. He knew that the cycle of life continued, and that somehow Evelyn would always be there, accompanying him, whispering to his heart that, no matter how difficult things may seem, there is always a way to move forward, to love and be loved, and to find true peace.